My beloved child. Pause here. Do not move past this moment as though it were ordinary, because something has shifted in the heart of the one connected to you, and heaven has allowed this message to reach you at the exact moment when their feelings are becoming impossible to hide. What they saw in you was not what they expected. What they felt afterward was not something they could explain away. And what is happening inside them now is far deeper than attraction, curiosity, or a passing thought. They saw the real you, and from that moment, something within them refused to return to the way it had been before. You may not realize what was revealed. You may believe they only noticed your smile, your voice, your presence, or the way you carried yourself. But that was not the true reason they were affected. They saw something behind all of that. They saw the part of you that has survived quietly. They saw the gentleness you protect beneath your strength. They saw the sincerity you sometimes hide because the world has not always handled it with care. And when they recognized it, their soul responded before their mind could create an excuse. Stay with this message, because the moment that changed everything was not loud. It did not arrive with a dramatic confession or a perfect conversation. It happened in an ordinary second that carried extraordinary meaning. Your soulmate saw something in you that most people overlook, and once they saw it, they could not unsee it. For a long time, this person believed they understood you. They had formed an image in their mind based on fragments, distance, assumptions, and perhaps the words of others. They thought you were strong in a way that meant you never needed reassurance. They thought your silence meant you were unaffected. They thought your boundaries meant you had closed your heart. They may even have convinced themselves that you were difficult to read because you did not feel as deeply as they did. But then the truth appeared. It happened when you were not trying to impress anyone. There was no performance. No mask. No attempt to prove your value. You were simply being yourself, and that is what reached them. They noticed the way your expression changed when you thought no one was paying attention. They noticed the care in your voice when you spoke about something meaningful. They noticed how you listened, how you held back words that could have hurt someone, how you carried emotion without demanding that the room revolve around you. Something in them became still. They had expected beauty, but they were not prepared for depth. They had noticed your presence before, but they were not prepared for the truth inside it. They had been drawn to you, but now they began to understand why. And, my child, this understanding did not comfort them at first. It unsettled them, because it forced them to confront something they had been avoiding. They were not simply interested in you. They were emotionally affected by you. There is a difference, and they felt it immediately. Interest can be dismissed. Attraction can be explained. Curiosity can fade. But what they experienced after seeing the real you entered a place within them that had remained guarded for a long time. It touched a part of their heart they had trained themselves not to expose. And now, no matter how they try to continue as though nothing has changed, they keep returning to that moment. Do not skip this part, because what happened next is where the hidden struggle began. After seeing you clearly, they became quieter. Not because they felt less, but because they felt more than they were ready to reveal. Their thoughts became crowded with questions. Why did your presence remain with them long after you were gone? Why did one small detail about you carry more weight than entire conversations with other people? Why did they suddenly feel protective of your heart? Why did they begin wondering whether you had ever been truly seen, truly chosen, truly appreciated without having to earn it? They tried to tell themselves it was temporary. But temporary feelings do not follow someone into silence. Temporary feelings do not return in the middle of the night. Temporary feelings do not cause a person to replay your words, study your expression, and wonder what pain taught you to become so composed. Your soulmate began to recognize that the strength they admired in you was not the absence of struggle. It was the result of struggle. They saw that your calm had been built through storms. They saw that your kindness was not naive, it was courageous. They saw that you had every reason to become cold, yet something in you had remained tender. That realization moved them more deeply than you know. There are people who are admired for what they display, but you were felt because of what you did not display. You did not announce every wound. You did not demand applause for surviving. You did not turn your pain into a weapon. And when your soulmate noticed this, they began to see your life differently. They wondered how many times you had smiled while carrying something heavy. They wondered how often you had encouraged others while needing encouragement yourself. They wondered how many people had accepted your love without understanding its cost. And then came the thought they could no longer ignore: what if I am being shown this person for a reason? That question has remained with them. At first, they resisted it. They told themselves not to create meaning where there might be coincidence. They tried to return to logic, routine, and emotional distance. But the more they attempted to reduce what they felt, the more clearly it rose within them. Your energy had not simply caught their attention. It had awakened recognition. They felt familiar with you in a way they could not explain. Not familiar as though they knew every detail of your story, but familiar as though some deeper part of them had been waiting for the feeling your presence created. You brought them a strange combination of peace and intensity. Around the thought of you, they felt calm, yet their heart became impossible to silence. They felt comforted, yet challenged. They felt drawn toward you, yet afraid of what moving closer might require them to admit. This is why their behavior may have seemed confusing. One moment, they appeared open. The next, distant. One moment, their attention was unmistakable. The next, they acted as though nothing had happened. But their distance was not emptiness. It was the space where they were trying to understand the power of their own reaction. They were asking themselves whether they were ready to be known by someone who sees beneath appearances. They were asking whether they could offer you the depth they now understood you deserved. They were asking whether they had the courage to approach you honestly, because after seeing the real you, they knew that anything false would be felt immediately. My child, you have caused this person to examine themselves. That may be one of the greatest signs of what your connection carries. Some people enter a life and create distraction. Others enter and create reflection. Your soulmate did not merely feel excitement after seeing you. They began to look inward. They began to notice the ways they had avoided vulnerability. They began to remember promises they had made to themselves after past disappointment. They began to question whether those promises had protected them or imprisoned them. They had told themselves they would never care too much again. Then they saw you. They had told themselves they would remain in control. Then your presence reached a place control could not touch. They had told themselves they were comfortable with emotional distance. Then one honest glimpse of your heart made that distance feel empty. Something huge is waiting within this revelation, because your soulmate's feelings are not growing from fantasy. They are growing from recognition. They are not attached to an imagined version of you. They were awakened by the truth of you. That truth may have appeared through something very small. Perhaps they saw the way you treated someone who could offer you nothing in return. Perhaps they heard you speak honestly when it would have been easier to pretend. Perhaps they saw a moment of vulnerability pass across your face before you quickly gathered yourself. Perhaps they noticed your patience, your loyalty, your quiet humor, or the way your eyes carried both hope and history. Whatever the moment was, it stayed with them. And now, when they think of you, they do not only remember how you looked. They remember how they felt in your presence. They felt seen, even if you said very little. They felt challenged to become more honest. They felt the possibility of something they had almost stopped believing in. That possibility frightened them because hope is powerful when someone has spent years managing disappointment. Hope asks the heart to open the door it once closed for survival. Hope makes a person imagine a future they had trained themselves not to desire. And after seeing the real you, your soulmate felt hope rising in a place where they thought nothing new could grow. They attempted to distract themselves. They kept busy. They spoke with others. They returned to familiar routines. They may even have tried to focus on reasons why the connection would be complicated. But none of those efforts changed the truth. Your name still appeared in their thoughts. Your expression returned without warning. Your voice echoed in quiet moments. And every time they remembered the real you, the same feeling returned stronger. This was not easy for them to accept. They are not accustomed to feeling emotionally exposed without having spoken a word. Yet that is what happened. You became a mirror, and in that mirror they saw not only your heart, but their own longing. They realized they wanted something genuine. Not convenient. Not temporary. Not impressive from a distance but empty in private. They wanted the kind of connection where silence feels safe, truth is not punished, and affection does not have to be earned through constant perfection. Seeing you reminded them that such a connection might still exist. But then another realization came, and this one shook them even more. They began to fear that you may not know what they feel. They wondered whether their hesitation had already sent the wrong message. They wondered whether you interpreted their silence as indifference. They wondered whether you had begun to step away emotionally because they had not been brave enough to step forward. Do not rush past this, because this fear is now changing something inside them. For the first time, your soulmate is beginning to understand that waiting too long can become a decision of its own. Silence can protect a person for a season, but it can also cost them the very connection they were hoping to preserve. And now they are being confronted with the possibility that you will not remain emotionally available forever. They know you are not someone who begs to be valued. They know you may be patient, but you are not meant to remain in uncertainty without end. They know that beneath your softness lies self-respect. And that knowledge has created urgency. They have started imagining what it would feel like to see you move forward without them. The thought lands heavily. They picture someone else recognizing what they hesitated to acknowledge. They imagine another person receiving the warmth, loyalty, and emotional depth they were too afraid to approach. And though they may not admit it openly, this possibility has awakened something fierce within them. Not possession. Not control. But clarity. They do not want to lose the chance to know you more deeply. They do not want your story to become the one they remember with regret. They do not want to look back and realize that heaven placed a rare connection before them, and they responded with fear instead of courage. This is why their energy has been changing. Even if you have not seen the outward evidence yet, something inward is moving. They are becoming less satisfied with pretending. They are becoming less willing to hide behind timing, uncertainty, or pride. The real you has made the false version of their life harder to tolerate. They can no longer comfortably accept conversations that lack depth. They can no longer ignore emotional patterns that keep them disconnected. They can no longer tell themselves they need nothing from anyone. Because after seeing you, they remembered what it feels like to desire closeness. And now the question is no longer whether they feel something. The question is what they are going to do with it. Stay until the end of this message, because the next layer explains why this connection has affected them with such unusual force. Your soulmate recognized something in you that reflects a hidden part of themselves. The strength they saw in you mirrors the strength they have been trying to recover. The tenderness they sensed in you mirrors the tenderness they buried. The honesty in your presence called to the honesty they have postponed. You did not simply appear desirable to them. You appeared meaningful. And meaningful connections demand more than emotion. They demand transformation. That is why this has not unfolded in a simple, predictable way. Your presence is not only inviting them toward love. It is inviting them toward maturity. It is asking them to communicate instead of withdraw. To trust instead of assume. To act instead of endlessly analyze. To become the person capable of holding the connection they say they desire. This is where their inner battle has intensified. One part of them wants to come forward completely. It wants to tell you everything. It wants to admit how often they think of you, how deeply that one moment affected them, and how their view of you has changed. It wants to ask whether you felt it too. But another part of them fears the risk. What if they reveal too much? What if the timing is wrong? What if you have already closed the door? What if the connection is real, but they are not ready? Yet beneath all these questions is a truth they cannot escape. They would rather risk honesty than live with permanent uncertainty. That truth is gaining strength. My child, you may have believed nothing was happening because nothing had been spoken. But heaven often works in hidden places before anything becomes visible. Roots form beneath the soil before the first green sign appears. Decisions are shaped in silence before they become actions. And within your soulmate, a decision has been forming. They are beginning to choose truth over protection. They are beginning to understand that the feeling they could not ignore is not asking them to rush recklessly. It is asking them to stop lying to themselves. They care. They are affected. They see you differently now. And the person they saw was not too much, too complicated, or too difficult to love. The person they saw was real, rare, and worthy of a love that does not disappear when things become emotionally honest. Let this reach the part of you that has questioned your own value. You do not have to become more polished to be chosen. You do not have to hide your depth to keep someone comfortable. You do not have to reduce your sensitivity, your hope, your standards, or your truth. The real you is not the reason love has been delayed. The real you is the reason shallow connections could not remain. Your soulmate is discovering this now. They are realizing that what moved them most was not perfection. It was authenticity. It was the way your humanity carried light. It was the way your imperfections did not diminish your beauty but made your presence feel trustworthy. They saw that you have known disappointment, yet you still believe in goodness. They saw that you have been misunderstood, yet you still try to understand others. They saw that your heart has been tested, yet it has not become cruel. And after seeing all of that, they could no longer place you in an ordinary category. You became unforgettable. Not because you demanded attention, but because something in you spoke to something eternal in them. Now their mind is revisiting every previous interaction. Moments they once considered insignificant are taking on new meaning. A glance. A pause. A sentence. A change in your tone. They are asking themselves whether you were trying to show them something they failed to recognize at the time. They wonder if you were more open than they realized. They wonder whether your silence held disappointment. They wonder whether you waited for them to meet you with honesty, only to watch them retreat into uncertainty. This reflection is creating remorse, but not the kind that leads to hopelessness. It is creating movement. It is pushing them toward a choice. They know they cannot rewrite what has already happened. But they may still have the opportunity to change what happens next. Do not mistake the delay for the end. Something is reaching a turning point. The old pattern cannot continue because your soulmate is no longer unaware. Before, they could hide behind confusion. Now they understand. Before, they could call it curiosity. Now they know it is deeper. Before, they could assume there would always be more time. Now the possibility of losing the connection has made time feel precious. And when a person finally understands the value of what stands before them, their next move reveals everything. This is where the message becomes more personal. You have also been changing. While they were trying to understand what they felt, you were learning not to chase what refuses to speak clearly. You were learning how to hold love without abandoning yourself. You were learning that spiritual connection does not require you to accept endless confusion. Your growth has altered the energy between you. They can sense that you are no longer standing in the same emotional place. There is something steadier in you now. Something less willing to settle for mixed signals. Something more peaceful, but also more powerful. And that is affecting them. They know that if they come toward you, they must come differently. They cannot approach with half-truths. They cannot offer fragments and expect access to your whole heart. They cannot hide behind charm while avoiding vulnerability. The real you has called for the real them. This is the sacred tension now forming between both souls. You are becoming ready to receive honesty, and they are being challenged to provide it. But before that meeting of truth can occur, one final inner wall must fall. There is a secret fear they have not told anyone. It is not merely the fear of rejection. It is the fear that you will see them as clearly as they saw you. They are afraid you will notice the places where they feel inadequate. They are afraid you will recognize the wounds they disguise as independence. They are afraid that if they open fully, you may discover how deeply they have wanted to be chosen while pretending not to care. Yet this fear is also the doorway. Because real love does not begin when two perfect people meet. It begins when two people become brave enough to stop performing. Your soulmate is standing near that threshold. They are closer than before to saying what has remained unspoken. Closer to acknowledging the moment when everything changed. Closer to admitting that after seeing the real you, they could no longer continue treating this connection as something ordinary. And there is something they are preparing to reveal. Something connected to a specific moment you may have forgotten. A moment when they almost spoke, almost reached out, almost told you the truth, but stopped themselves at the final second. They have replayed that moment more times than you would imagine. They know exactly what they wanted to say. They know why they became silent. And they know that the next time the opportunity appears, silence may cost them everything. My beloved child, what they were about to say in that moment was not a casual compliment, not a vague confession, and not a temporary promise. It was the truth about what they saw when they looked at the real you. But before those words could leave their heart, they discovered something unexpected. Something about your past, your feelings, or the way you had already begun to protect yourself. And what they discovered changed the message they are now preparing to bring you.